A man pulled the reins, bringing the horse-drawn carriage to a stop. A horde of zombies was passing by in front of them, and attempting to cross would surely attract attention. Jerry suggested waiting until the zombies moved farther away before proceeding, but Aaron insisted on continuing forward, suggesting they take a detour. Their mission was to deliver supplies to Oceanside and ensure its safety, leaving no time to waste on the road. So they drove the wagon off the road to cut through the woods. What they didn't realize was that the zombies were far from simple. After a while, they had walked a considerable distance in the woods, but to their surprise, the carriage got stuck in a pit, and despite their best efforts, it wouldn't budge. Aaron encouraged them to try again and, if all else failed, to abandon the carriage. This time their efforts were more synchronized and the wagon was already showing signs of breaking loose. The wheels ran over Jerry's feet. Jerry took a moment to relax and then looked at his knee to see blood soaking through his trousers. Assisted by Lydia and others, Jerry tried to walk, but it was clear that it would be challenging to continue the journey. At that moment, Aaron surveyed the surroundings, seeking a place to rest. Fortunately, he noticed a building in the distance that seemed suitable. Additionally, there was even a surrounding wall. 10 minutes later, they entered the structure. It turned out to be an abandoned amusement park, seemingly untouched by human presence for a long time, and remarkably, there were no signs of zombies. Jerry chimed in that it was a great place. Not only was it big, but it was fenced and plowed, and next to the river it was a rare refuge. They made some simple adjustments as night fell. Resigned to spending the night there, Aaron and Lydia were on night watch. As they were chatting, it was slowly getting dark. They sat around the fire because of the cooler temperatures at night. Despite the seemingly secure environment with the surrounding wall, Lydia intermittently heard creaking noises that sounded like a door. Lydia felt a bit nervous, but Aaron reassured her, saying, "Don't worry, we've checked multiple times to ensure the main gate is securely locked. It could just be the wind making noises against the windows." However, the noises grew louder, and Lydia, certain it wasn't the wind, decided to investigate. With weapons in hand, Aaron and Lydia approached the source of the sound, only to encounter two zombies emerging from the entrance, followed by even more behind them. They were baffled. How did these zombies get in here, and there were so many of them? There must be at least 20 of them. Without hesitation, they confronted the zombies head-on. Lydia had just smashed a zombie with her stick and was confronted by a second zombie, but this zombie grabbed her stick, and it was so strong that Lydia couldn't break free. Without hesitation, Lydia swiftly retrieved a knife from her waist and plunged it into the zombie's chest.
We gotta get the right now!
Lydia pushed the zombies away and they moved towards the house, calling out for their companions as they ran. Cole rushed out when he heard the commotion. He also froze. How could so many zombies come in? Jerry's leg was injured and he walked slower, but there were a few zombies around him.
Go!
The number of zombies is really too much and are surrounded from all sides so that they have no way back. Now they can only hide inside the house.
Okay, there's 50 of them! How they get in the wall?
Just as they were puzzled, the doorknob began to turn. They couldn't believe their eyes as it indeed was turning.
The hell? When did it take this frickin' doorknob?
If zombies were capable of opening doors, it could only mean that the Whisperers were among them. With no time to ponder, the counter in front of them was already giving in to the force of the impact. Aaron urged them to climb up onto it. Lydia wasted no time. She stood on the table, removed the cover above her head, and flipped up. Soon, they reached the second floor, a small balcony. As they looked at the zombies, it was clear that their numbers exceeded 50, and more were constantly converging. Aaron, having switched with Jerry, urged him to go up first. Jerry, not only chubby but also injured, climbed the stairs panting heavily. Soon Aaron came up too, and they had a quick discussion about what to do. Leaving these zombies unattended might lead to the collapse of the entire building. Aaron made up his mind. He instructed the two young ones to jump down and attack the zombies from the side while he operated from the inside, coordinating inside and out to deal with the zombies, all the while being cautious of the Whisperers mixed among them. Without delay, Lydia and Cole leaped down. Jerry, in his current state, couldn't be relied upon. Suddenly, a hand reached up behind him, the same zombie that had attacked Lydia earlier. The zombie climbed up slowly. Luckily, Jerry noticed and turned around. Zombies not only climbed walls but also used tools. If not the Whisperers, then who could it be? Aaron rushed up, using his prosthetic limb to push the zombie away. but it quickly lunged back. Aaron punched and punched. He hated the Whisperers more than anything. Finally, he tore off the person's mask, only to be surprised that it was indeed a zombie. With no time to dwell on this discovery, Aaron pulled out Lydia's knife and plunged it into the zombie's head. Having done this, both stood in shock for a moment. As dawn broke, the zombies below had been cleared after a night of battle. Yet, they couldn't fathom how this particular zombie had achieved such feats. It defied logical explanation. Soon, they set off again, determined to reach Oceanside as soon as possible. This incident needed to be shared with their companions. Some zombies might have evolved a certain level of intelligence. Now to explain the timeline, they had left the Commonwealth a day earlier, unaware that Rosita and the others had been attacked, subdued, and taken away. Even the children weren't spared. Only Daryl and Carol managed to escape. Daryl and Carol, now lost and unsure of where to rescue their companions, were like headless flies. Initially, Daryl thought of seeking out Michael, but Carol suspected he might betray them. Carol then thought of someone else, Lance. Currently in prison, he was well acquainted with all things related to the Commonwealth. 2 soldiers were on duty at the prison. Suddenly, Daryl took action. The other soldier turned around, only to find his companion missing. He sensed something was wrong. Carol pulled her bowstring, readying herself. They didn't kill the soldiers, they merely tied them up. These guards were just following orders. With the keys in hand, they began searching cell by cell for Lance. After checking several rooms without finding Lance, Carol walked into the central cell. She hesitated on how to describe what she saw to Daryl. Daryl approached, took a look, and fell silent. They opened the door and walked in. The scene in front of them was a bit creepy. A normal person would have thrown up. Lance sat in the corner, muttering to himself. Surrounded by bits of flesh and bloodstains, he literally fed that body to Sebastian. Daryl pulled out a knife to give Sebastian his final journey. Following that, he pressed Lance against the wall, gripping his neck tightly.
Where'd they take him?
Seeing Lance remain silent, Daryl covered Lance's mouth and used his thumb to press on the wound on his face. Carol intervened, stopping Daryl. After all, Lance had once helped her, and he seemed visibly shaken and frightened. Shouting proved futile, prompting Carol to take out a knife and threaten. "We can't let you stay alive here. You need to tell me where Pamela sent our friend, or you'll die right here." Upon hearing this, Lance started to come to his senses, staring blankly at Carol and then shaking his head. As they were about to take action, Lance hurriedly spoke up.
I'll show you.
This guy changes his face real quick. Just as they prepared to leave the cell, Daryl noticed a tracker on Lance's foot. While Daryl initially considered cutting off Lance's foot, he decided against it. Realizing they would have to carry Lance, they opted to leave the Commonwealth first and figure out a plan later. When they reached the doorway,
I need to do something first. Wait.
When they're done, they walk out of the cell. Lance, familiar with the terrain, directed them towards the back door. Suddenly, soldiers outside started chasing them, firing shots. Daryl halted, facing them in a standoff.
Go! Get him out of here!
Not without you!
I'll figure it out! Go!
Carol, decisive as ever, took Lance and left. Half an hour later, Pamela got a call that Lance had been rescued. She arrived at the prison with a serious expression on her face. When she entered the cell, the sight in front of her made Pamela's anger soar, only to see Sebastian's head smashed to pieces. Sebastian was already dead, but after turning into a zombie it was at least able to walk around. But now there's nothing left. Pamela suddenly noticed a coin in Sebastian's brain matter. Isn't this Lance's? And judging by the situation, it seemed like Lance deliberately left it there as a symbol of his dissatisfaction with her. Pamela's expression turned fierce. Lance had essentially killed her son twice, and she was determined to make him pay. In the evening, Carol and Lance finally escaped the Commonwealth. Lance, having narrowly escaped death, couldn't help but marvel at the value of freedom above all else. He also admired Carol, noting that in a situation like the one they had just faced, most people wouldn't abandon their companions. This woman was truly exceptional. Furthermore, he prayed for Daryl's safe return. Carol, unwilling to hear Lance's ramblings, pointed her gun at him and said, "Stop trying to sow discord. I've had enough of your manipulative language. Would someone like you be concerned about Daryl? Hurry up and tell us where our people were taken." Lance immediately responded, I promised I would take you there. I'm saying these things because, back in the prison, I fed people piece by piece to Pamela's son. My mind isn't clear. If you want to kill me, go ahead." As they argued, the roar of an approaching car echoed nearby. They quickly crouched in the grass, suspecting that the Commonwealth was searching for them, likely due to the tracker on Lance's foot. Soon, a vehicle stopped at the foot of the mountain, and they could faintly hear soldiers preparing to search the grassy area. Lance, feeling anxious as discovery would mean a gruesome death, urged Carol to follow him to a place where they could evade the soldiers. Initially reluctant to comply, Carol hesitated, suspecting that Lance might set a trap for her. However, there was no choice as the soldiers were already searching with flashlights. Lance led her to an abandoned building, claiming it was a former project of the Commonwealth. The place was pitch black and in disrepair, but Carol had no other option but to enter. Lance, adept in navigating political landscapes, spoke flatteringly throughout the journey, praising both her and Daryl while condemning Pamela for ingratitude. Carol merely listened, well aware of the kind of person Lance was. After a while, they caught a whiff of a foul odor, indicating danger. Suddenly, a zombie grabbed Lance's leg. Carol stepped forward to pull Lance away, but whether out of fear or some other emotion, Lance forcefully knocked away Carol's flashlight and tugged at her arm. At that moment, zombies closed in behind Carol, forcing her to turn and face them. Because the flashlight was lost, the passage became pitch black, and nothing could be seen. Moreover, Lance had disappeared without a trace, as if he had vanished. At this point, Carol heard growls ahead, indicating that zombies were approaching, and the sounds were getting closer. She wasn't prepared to sit idly by. The firelight illuminated, and only then did Carol realize the multitude of zombies surrounding her. Just as Carol breathed a sigh of relief, another zombie lunged at her. She struggled to resist. The zombie seemed particularly slippery, likely soaked by the rain. Carol exerted considerable effort to push the zombie away and then proceeded to dispatch it with her handgun. A light also shone on Carol's body.
Sorry, the lights went out. I thought you were right behind me.
Carol said nothing, and Lance didn't help, probably hoping she'd die here. However, now wasn't the time for settling scores. The sound of gunfire would undoubtedly attract soldiers, so they needed to leave quickly. They ran for 10 minutes until they reached the roadside, finally stopping to catch their breaths. Just as they thought they could rest, Commonwealth soldiers, who had been waiting, appeared. Lance's tracker had given them away.
Radio back to command that we found him. But they put up a fight, so we had to put him down.
Yes, sir.
These men were ready to kill them immediately. Just as they were about to shoot, the arrival was none other than Daryl, who had also managed to escape the Commonwealth. He had been trailing the soldiers and happened to rescue them. Carol was relieved to see Daryl was okay. Afterwards, they turned their gaze towards Lance. Lance, no longer daring to play tricks, could only obediently lead them to find people. They arrived at a train station guarded by 2 soldiers. Daryl and Carol were surprised because, according to Lance, the Commonwealth had restored the trains and was trying to expand its influence to create a bigger country. They aimed to conquer more communities, and those people Pamela disliked were all sent to an unknown location to build railroad tracks. Lance said to Daryl and Carol, "I'll take you to your friends. There are still a lot of forks in the railway that you won't find on your own." However, Daryl refused Lance. Not only was he carrying a tracker, but he was also ready to harm them at any moment.
What? But you can't get there without me.
Yeah, we can.
How's that?
Just said. There's a train.
We wait for it to come and then we see where it goes.
Lance became anxious, thinking that these people would surely kill Pamela. At that time, the Commonwealth would be a leaderless period, and he could step in to seize power. Lance then tried to brainwash them, saying it was for the sake of 50,000 people, and so on. But Carol directly told Lance, "Originally, we were going to kill you. Now we're giving you a chance to escape anywhere you want. This is already a showing mercy."
But that's not who I am anymore. That guy is gone. He died back in that cell.
Seeing Daryl walking towards him, Lance was left with the shadow of Daryl stabbing his hand with a knife. Daryl was undoubtedly a ruthless character. Lance turned away and left, leaving behind words that might really lead to his death. Daryl and Carol silently watched him leave, observing how he would choose. If he made the wrong choice, they wouldn't mind sending him on his way. Lance's eyes glanced towards the car. Daryl and Carol had long anticipated that Lance would act this way. It was also a test for him. Thus, this high-ranking official met his end in the desolate wilderness. They tacitly didn't say much. After 15 years in the apocalypse, they were no longer willing to kill, but sometimes they had to. Now, they had to go near the tracks and follow the train to find Rosita and the others.